I guess here we go. Tonight, program, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce a great Elmer to many of us that have been here before us and to us today in the amateur radio hobby. He also furthers our great hobby of radio by appearing as a regular on Ham Nation, a social media platform. He also is a professional organ player. He has published several books, and he has had a business that he manufactured microphones, headsets for amateur radio, as well as avionics and entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Bob Heil, K9EID.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Everything looking okay here? Audio good and all that?
Maybe a little louder, Bob.
Do that.
Do you have a microphone that you could do something with?
Yeah, I do. I bought it at Walmart about 10 minutes ago. Yeah. And I got all my tubes warmed up. You got to have tubes warming up, you know. So we're in good shape, I think. Well, thanks for having me. I love doing these meetings. This is number 267 since February of 2020, but I just love sharing this hobby. And this is one thing that the pandemic has done good for ham radio. I think it's going to change forever the way we do club meetings. So we're good to go. How much time do I have?
All of it. You've got hour and a half time until we start falling asleep.
I will guarantee you will never fall asleep.
Thank you.
No. Well, I take a few minutes here to get into where I came from as far as ham radio. It all started for me when I was 15 years old. And I got a technician license, went down to Walter Ash in St. Louis and bought a Harvey Wells SX99 and a RME converter. I was a technician for 17 years. And you're going to say, why? Because I got into this hobby at the start of the largest sunspot cycle. It has never been even closely repeated. I mean, 6 meters was open constantly. It's hard to realize that in today, but it was. And at that same time, later on that year, I got a job. I had been playing about 3 years or so, and I got a job at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. Stan Can was the organist there, and he adopted me to be his substitute. But that wasn't the only reason he wanted me to help him. That organ hadn't been played in 20 years, and it has over 3,500 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot, and they all had to be voiced and tuned. And so that is where I learned to listen. Hearing is a physical process. Listening is a mental process. And I learned how important listening had become to me. I'd never realized it was a foundation of 2 of my careers later on. And I do hope that before the evening's out, you'll understand about listening. We get really into it in a bit. But the station kept growing. I was playing every night, but I bought a 6 and 2 Thunderbolt and put it together as a kit. And in 1962, I built the first transverter. So you could take your 20-meter transmitter, which you'll see that central electronics up above that, and that 20 meters out of that, and then I band switched either 6 or 2 meters in the transverter and into the amplifier. And I was one of the first few that had a kilowatt on 6 and 2 meter single sideband. It wasn't really heard of in those days. It started growing. I still have the 20A, and I still have some of the amplifier. There's the 20A, like right over there, and the Harvey Wells is down there on the bottom. That's all my vintage gear from years past, and I'm on the air every day with it in the AM window, 3870 to 3890. That's a gentleman's agreement. That's where we find the AM guys. But as you can see, I've always got something on the bench. I'm working on a modulator right now, but that'll be my job for tomorrow. But I needed a bigger antenna, And so the J-beam people in England wanted me to do a test if I could, because they needed somebody with a lot of power. So they sent over a 128 element 2-meter array and had a local FM dealer that put up towers and stuff, and he K9 SGD, K9 EBA was a contractor. He had the cranes and all that, and they assembled some of this for me. The main thing was it we had to have phasing harnesses and all made all that up, and it all had to be in or out of phase, whichever had to happen. And I learned a lot about phasing, and we're going to get into that big time in a little bit. But the bands around Marissa, Illinois, down in southern Illinois, 50 miles southeast of St. Louis, they found out there was a guy with a soldering iron. And so I started fixing guitar amps and renting Hammond organs and stuff like that. And I had been playing around with some small PA things, but in 1967, 68 in there, the Fox called me again, and they said, "Hey, we're throwing out some speakers, and we haven't seen you in a couple years. You hadn't been playing here because I was on other ventures." And he said, "Would you like to have them?" Well, Ham doesn't throw anything away. So I rented a big old box truck, and those two big cabinets you see, well, there were four of them. This is just the left side. Brought those back home, put new JBL speakers in them. A friend of mine had a fiberglass shop, and we whipped up some fiberglass radial horns and tweeters, and it was a magnificent structure. I didn't really know exactly. It was a big hi-fi system for me, but started renting them to some of the local bands. Didn't have much of mixers in that days. I mean, the sound reinforcement industry, this is what we had. No equalization, just 6 channels in, and that was it. They're broadcast thing for broadcast radio. Well, my first job was with Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, my big job. the the Kiel Auditorium called me and said, "You the guy that's got that big PA?" And I said, "Well, I've got a sound system." "Well, we've heard about it, so get it up here." And we did that job, and that started it all off. And I mean, it was crazy from there on. And the only problem was we needed a mixer, so I worked on a deal with Langevin. They were just producing this. It was the first one out. And boy, this was a miracle. It was 8 channels and sliders, not just rotary knobs. You could see your mix better. And I bought 2 of those. I flew out to California, and I bought 2 of those. And I had a carpenter there in Marissa. He built this cabinet for it all. And we put the 2 mixers in there. But the really interesting thing was up in the top, there's those 2 meters, that's a compressor limiter that they made. Now, these are all things that really hadn't happened. I mean, this was brand new stuff. I was going crazy when I learned about that they were finally being produced. Up there in the corner where you see that bright light from the flash was a miracle. We didn't have equalization until 1968. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But there was the miracle. And we put that into the console. And we were getting jobs all over the country, all over the world, because the word got out that this guy in Illinois had this incredible sound system. And so away we went. Groups that you all know, love, and so on. And we had a lot of things with Joe Walsh and Peter Frampton, and I had built the talk box for Joe to do Rocky Mountain Way. It's just a 100-watt driver with a low pass and a high pass filters, and that hose they put that in their mouth, and their guitar amp drove it, so that you could actually vary the sound by what you did with your voice. Frampton was the only guy that really made it talk, and he could.
Clap your hands, clap your hands. Alright, okay. Bob Heil, Bob Heil, Bob Heil.
Well, amazing. Amazing, amazing stuff. We became really good friends. His girlfriend, you see there, Penny McCall, she had called me one day and she says, "Hey, listen, I'm with Peter now." And she said, "I need a Christmas present. Don't send him a guitar." So I sent him the talk box, and you can write the rest of his history. So I was really thrilled that we could be there. But I got a phone call one day from Paul Klipsch. I couldn't believe it. Paul Klipsch was the father of hi-fi. He was the father of the folded horn. And he was calling me, and he wanted to come and see that kilowatt sound system. Well, it was an 8 kilowatt sound system. So he flew his plane up to Marissa, Illinois, and all day long it was like, "Well, why'd you do that? Well, how come you did that? Where'd you learn to do that? What college did you go to?" I barely made it through high school. I was too busy. I started playing professionally when I was 14. And I didn't go to high school very much. I went the number of days they required. My grades were terrible, but enough to pass. That's all I cared about. Because I was learning too much from ham radio, building things, from listening and voicing the pipe organ and playing the pipe organ every night. So I never went to college. But as I say so much and so often, ham radio was my college education. Well, Paul was amazed, and he put me in his airplane that night. We went back to his place in Hope, Arkansas, and he he was a giant in the industry. Everybody knew about Paul. He had started the AES and did all kinds of different things. But his corner horn was something. There he had in his lab. That's an old telephone exchange building. That's what his laboratory. And he built this corner horn. This was just a sample, but he built it in plexiglass so you could see all the different angles. It sit in the corner of a room, and you had to have an 8-foot wall to the left and an 8-foot wall to the right. Then that corner horn was screwed into the wall, and your room, 16 foot of it, became part of the speaker. If you've never experienced, notice I did not say here, if you've never experienced a K-horn, take the opportunity someday, because it is absolutely amazing. I learned so much from him. And in the few days I was with him, why, he was guiding me, the things he said, you need to know some of these things, Heil. And he was guiding me to a lot of the studies of the Bell laboratories back in the 1920s. And he said, if you're going to get into audio at all, as you are, you need to know some of the history. And boy, was there ever history. And as you know, I didn't go to college. I didn't really get into much studying, but he got me a book. This was my college education. It's 800 pages, and it's anything you want to know about audio. This is it, the Audio Encyclopedia. It really teaches me a lot still today. And so that's how I started learning things. And I had to go to the library. You guys and gals, you can just look in Google and you can learn all these things. But what had happened, he wanted me to learn about the early telephone system. You see, it didn't work very well. They put two wires in New Jersey all the way out to California. And every 500 miles across America was a relay station to keep all the voltage up, the frequencies up, and so on. Well, when they got to the other end of the wires for the first time, and they started speaking to each other, this is what they heard. And it's like, what happened to our great audio? Wait a minute. They had, from all of the tests and so on they had done, it was all level, it was equal, it was flat, as it should be. No, it wasn't supposed to be. It didn't work well. What was wrong? And so, let me bring this back up. And so they put 4,000 scientists. Yes, there were 4,000 scientists that got into this project. And they discovered a very interesting thing. Our ears are not flat. We don't all hear alike, but we do have this phenomenon. The two lead scientists were Dr. Harvey Fletcher and Dr. Weldon Munson. I sure hope some of you have, and all of you, know about these gentlemen because they really, really brought a lot of things to the table. They just worked on our ears about how the human hearing system worked. What they discovered, you look up at the top, at 110 dB or so, it's almost flat. That's why kids like to listen to music real loud. But you get down here where you're listening today, 20 or 30 dB a level, it's not very flat. And what they discovered was this simple fact. And if you take one thing away tonight, I would hope you take this away. This is so important. The telephone system was 300 to 3,000 wide. Kind of sounds like something you talk into every day, isn't it? 300 to 3,000? Well, what they really discovered was the fact that they had to elevate 2.5K. 2.5K is the magic spot. And there were no equalizers. Nothing even talked about equalizers at this time. But they had to figure out a way to get that 2.5 up. And that's just what I did a minute ago. Remember what I said earlier about hearing. Remember, because what I'm going to do is I'm only going to take 2.5 away. I have a parametric equalizer in the mixer. And here it goes. There it is down to 2K. There it is at 1600. There it is at 1000. And there it is flat. But the essence of sound is gone. The F and the S, the P and the B, they all sound alike. And there's no essence. And syllables are lost. I'm going to bring that 2.5 back up again. And when we bring up, there it is at 1,000, 1,500, here comes 2,000. But when I hit 2.5K, you know it immediately. You know immediately what happened. It just sizzles for you. The essence of sound, it's spectacular. Without 2.5K, and so they had a job to do. They figured out what the problem was, but now what are they going to do to fix it? They didn't have equalization. Wasn't talked about. So they had to do it with high-pass filters, and that was the way they did it, which is a form of equalization. The high-pass filter is nothing but a capacitor and a resistor. There's the calculus if you want, but you do a large capacitor, it'll pass all of the frequencies. But then if you want to take some lows to ground, the resistor, a certain size resistor, depending on the frequency you want to cut, that's how you can play with audio with simple high-pass filters.
We're not hearing you, Bob.
Internet connection.
Oh, 1 second, internet connection problem. Okay, you might be back.
Okay, are we back?
You're back.
I wonder where you lost me. Did you hear when I took 2.5K out?
Yes,
Yeah.
and back up again.
Yeah, that's so very important. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But they had to do it in that telephone system of the 1920s with high-pass filters, capacitors and resistors, certain size capacitor and certain size resistor. The bass will be taken, the low end to be notched down the ground through that resistor, and all the highs through there, the capacitor. Well, there was a young man John Volkmann, look how young he was in the 1920s. He was working for RCA, and they put him on a job in 1930 when talkies came in. The motion picture playback systems were starting to be built because no more silence. They were all audio, motion pictures with audio, music, and voice. But how are they going to do it? It sounded terrible. Well, John had to figure it out, and he did. A little box like this was kind of a test model for him. He'd go into a theater and take the program source from the film or wherever, and then put it into the box and it'd come out of here and drive the audio amp. And by switching these around, he had various high pass, various low pass that he had built. He could figure out which exactly of the high pass or whatever he needed. So yes, once he did that, they were off and running. But this is very difficult for a lot of people to realize, but it's true. From 1920 to 1967, there was no equalization. We were void of that. We had a little rise in the 1950, 52 or through there when hi-fi came in, but it was nothing more than a simple high-pass filter, low-pass filter. And I know I had a hi-fi system in 1950, and it had a little bit of that, but not much. Well, we fast forward to 1967, Longevin. They built all kinds of mixers and stuff for professional use, radio stations and recording studios. They built the very first equalizer for professional use. You can see at the top notch, you could pick out the frequencies and then notch or boost it with the sliders. So that was a big deal. Shortly after that, Symmetrics came along with the parametric. Parametric means that you are the engineer and you have to figure out the frequencies, the level, the width. And here are 3 filters of parametric. You can change the parameters. This one I set the first filter at 100 hertz and 2 octaves wide. That means that it's going to be just two octaves if you're thinking about time and music. It's the same deal. And I notched it 160. The next one, where'd I put it? 2.5K. Yeah, and I just cranked the heck out of that one. And then the last one I put up about 5K. This was for one of my sound systems. But the parametric was really great. Well, I just couldn't stay away from ham radio. After about 12 years, I had sold my sound system company, got back to radio, but I couldn't believe it. What had happened to my great Art Collins audio, guys? What'd you do? Because this was the kind of stuff I heard, and it's like, what? All this distortion and this big muddy low end with no articulation. A few people had it right.
Oscar Juliet Yankee.
So a few people, but most of them. I'm going, what is the deal here? Well, the deal was.
Thank you. Copy.
Notice
3
how clean he is.
Sierra Delta.
That guy had it right. Well, I started finding out that they were using their matching microphone. It came in the radio, was in the box, it had their name on it. But it didn't sound very good, and it still doesn't. Why? Because they don't build their microphones. It's very simple. Hard to believe, but they just have an OEM company do it. And it's sad. So I started thinking, wait a minute, I had to do something about this. And so what I did, I borrowed some ideas from John Volkmann. And I was so happy Paul Clips guided me to all those studies. In 1982, I built the very first equalizer. I didn't realize that somebody else had not done it until then, but I discovered, as I wrote an article about it, I sent it to QST, And they called back and were just going crazy. They said, this is the first time that equalization was ever brought to ham radio. This is a revelation, and it will become the lead article and the cover award for July 1982. I was very humbled and very, very appreciative of all of this. I never realized what was happening. But it was a simple little box, and here it is. There are 2 filters in here. One of them is at 160 hertz. We can notch that or boost it. Where's the other one, the high? You know where it is. It's 2.5K. You can increase that or decrease it. You certainly don't want to decrease it, but if you do, there it is. This thing took off like crazy. It was a DIY article. I was wanting everybody to build it. Had all of the diagrams and stuff there that you could do that. Parts list. I made a mistake. I put my phone number in there, and I started getting phone calls. Guys they don't want to build it. They wanted it now. So the plant had been closed. I sold the plant a few years before that in 1980. So I called back 2 of my best solder gals, and we still had the printed circuit machines and all of that. So we opened up a little portion of it and started building EQ200s. That was the very first entrance of Heil sound into amateur radio. But the problem is, we had a problem, and I didn't realize that was going to happen. Guys and gals didn't know how to adjust it. It was very simple, but they didn't get it right. And so I had to go start a new website helping guys, but I did a lot of club meetings in person. And it came to being that the website really started to help. And today, if you need to go to our website, heilsound.com, there's two sites, the pro side for the broadcasters and the musicians and all that, and then the ham radio site. And in that ham radio site, under support, is about 50, 60 pages of everything's ICOM, all things Yaesu, all things Elecraft, all things this and that and so on, and we'll help you. But we'll go through one of those and show you just how simple it is to set up your ham radio. We look at the 7300. You see, all of the ICOMs are alike. I didn't tell you this part yet. In 1999, I got a letter from Dr. Inouye. He was the founder and president of ICOM. And he had a picture of his 781, but that was a great transceiver. It was the first one that had a scope in it. It was actually a CRT. And he had a picture of my equalizer and my gold line microphone. I'm going, oh my. I'm thinking of new radio, he typed. I want to use EQ. And so, starting with the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way out to the 7300, the new great little 705, they all have the EQ200. And it's just a wonderful thing that it started people thinking about equalization. And this is how simple it gets. What's the first thing you want to do when you sit down at a radio? Adjust the bandwidth. Forget about anything else. What are we going to do? Are we going to do rag chew? Are we going to do DX work? Let's do rag chew right now. So we're going to set that TBW, transmit bandwidth, from 100 to 2900. And then you go up to the equalizer. It's already set. We have set that for you in all the ICOMs. They're all the same. The bass is at 160 hertz. And the treble's at where? 2.5K. You can't change those. You don't need to. And you're going to minus the bass, roll off some of that low end, and increase the heck out of the treble, +3. and you play around with those. You want to make note of what they are. Listen to yourself in a monitor. I like to listen to myself in headphones in a second receiver set to the same bandwidth, and it works really good. But the monitors are pretty good in most of the radios today. What are you going to do about DX work? Well, back right after I did the equalizer, I built an element. I'm thinking, wait a minute, all these DXers and contesters, they're rolling off all the low end. They just want all that 2.5K. They don't care what they sound like. They sound terrible. So in 1984, I built the HC element. Many of you might have some of these. There are probably 100,000 out there, all over the world. The DXers love this. It's their tool. It's their real tool. And the thing about it is it has no low end. And it's probably the worst sounding you've ever heard. It's terrible. Well, why would you do that? Why would you build something that sounded that bad? Well, there's why. Nothing under 500 cycles is coming in to the transceiver. You see, it all starts at the microphone, no matter what kind of audio. But for DXers, we absolutely don't want the low end. We want that rich 2.5. And our HC4 and HC7s today, 10 dB, 10. I mean, they're like this in your head, but that's okay. We don't care how pretty it sounds. We're not here to be a broadcaster. We're here to get the essence, the F's and the S's, all of those syllables. We want them to break through the pile up. That's how you do it, by setting up your equalizers and in the right microphone element. And we're the only company that's doing that. Nobody else has ever done it. And I get all kinds of people that, oh, that's the worst sounding thing in the world. Well, I know that. It's the worst sounding microphone ever, but it puts all of our power where we need it. Now, to adjust the radio, we're going to adjust the TBW, the transmit bandwidth, to 500 to 2500. And we're going to notch all the low end out and punch the heck out of the treble, which is 2.5. And that's how you make the pile-ups. You can make them really profitable if you have the right transmitter and microphone set up. We carry it a little further. For about 35 years, Heil Sound has been the headphone manufacturer, and we own the market. And this is the latest. They're all thrilled with this. I asked for a lot of ideas before I build products, and this one's got a bunch of things in it. Had a lot of people want a balance control. If they're hard of hearing on one side or the other, no problem. You can balance it up. I also have a jack where you can plug in the logger. Anybody who wanted to listen, like a lot of people would have this for field day, and it really worked out great. And it's fabulous headset. But what is this? That's a phase reversal. We're the only manufacturer for about 12 years now, maybe a little longer. You can move signals around in your head with phase reversal in our headsets. You hear a pile up, and you got a little weakie back here. No problem. You reverse the phase. You can move signals around in your head. That little guy back here can come up front, and just makes a wonderful thing. And just even listening, it changes the whole conjecture. And so that's a very important thing. Also, the way it's built. We got into some of Paul Klipsch's, some of his findings, and he helped me years ago to take a speaker and take it out in free air, find out what the cone resonance was, and then you treat the cavity or the speaker box or whatever to that frequency, and it doesn't have any phase problems. And it really makes the speaker sound great. And that's what the Pro 7 does today. It has interchangeable elements. You can have the DX element, ICOM element, or the broadcast element. All of our headsets has a steel band up here. Every once in a while I'll read on EM, that Heil headset hurts my ears. You didn't read the instructions. Because all you got to do is shape it to your head. You're not going to break it. I got a little pinhead like me. You're not going to break it. But it's a miracle headset, and we're very proud of it. Again, I use so many ideas that guys and gals would come to me. Same thing with the microphone. Dr. Inouye at ICOM asked me to build the proper microphone. And so we did. We call it the ICM. Almost spells ICOM. It won't work on the Kenwood, won't work on the Yaesu, nothing. Only ICOM. Because ICOM has a very interesting thing. They have phantom power, 8 volts running down the mic line. And that's quite an ingenious thing where they've got 8 volts coming up the mic line. And on that same wire, after that 8 volts goes in and causes the FET in, see, it's an active microphone element. When the audio starts, it goes right back down that same wire. So you have DC and AC on the same conductor. It's pretty cool. But you cannot use dynamic mics on most of them. You need an electret. Well, a couple years later at Dayton, Dr. Hasegawa come to me. I want to do it better. His family owns Yaesu. So I said, yeah, we can do a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. Not so fast. What'd be the problem? Well, the problem would be education. What do you mean? You see, with the 2-band EQ, I already figured out the frequencies. All you have to do is plus or minus. With a parametric, there are 3 filters and there are 9 buttons. 9. And you have to figure out the frequency of each. They're not set. And so a lot of Yaesu owners are still in the default mode, and that's really sad because it's very simple. First of all, look at the top of the page. You're going to set the transmitter bandwidth. I like to set it from 200 to 3000. Can't forget that. Then you come back to these 9 buttons. There are 3 filters. All that fuzzed out stuff, that doesn't mean anything. That just identifies those filters. And 201, 202, 203. And all Yaesus are different. The next one might be a 301, another one would be a 401, 402. We don't care about that. What we care about is frequency level width, frequency level width, frequency level width. I set the first one at 200 minus 3 or 4, bandwidth of 2 octaves. Don't worry about it, just set that. Why did I choose 900? Well, somewhere between 600, 700, 800, 900, right in there is a real boxy sound. And if you want to hear it, do this to your ears while you talk. And you can hear that boxy sound. We want to get rid of that. And so we do. Set it at anywhere like 800, 900, minus 3 or 4. But where are you going to do the third one? You know where we're going to do it. It's 2.5K. It's going to be plus 8. And it's all so simple. And it's on our website. Looks like that. There you go. And it's so simple. Now, they have 2 equalizers. So there's not 9, there's 18 buttons. But the other equalizer is when you turn the processor on, you got to redo it. Well, I have something to tell you. Don't use processing. I hate compression. It only adds distortion. I want somebody to come to me and prove to me that compression and processing helps. No, what helps is the right microphone and the right equalization. That is what we need. And I proved to you several times tonight how important that is. And we just have to think about all these things that are out there that, I don't know, we don't hear about, and it really bugs me. And I got a really neat little thing to show you here about bandwidth, how important all of this is. Yeah, it's a balloon. No, this is not a joke. Think about the air in this balloon being your RF. Now, if we're going to do rag chew, we're going to stretch that out to 100 on the low end, 3K on the top. And we opened up 2K just a little bit, if you remember. So that's got a little rise in it. But for DX work, remember, we narrowed it up. We don't need all of this RF down here. We don't need all of this up here. It does zero, nothing to the articulation. What does? 2.5. So when you narrow it up, remember we've opened at 2.5 all the way, and what happens? Well, the RF has to go somewhere. Where's it going to go? You know where it's going to go. So you're going to have a very strong mid-range, and the essence of sound, the F and the S, are all going to be there. So when you're making these calls to the foreign countries, you are going to be the guy that breaks the pile up. And it's really very simple. What happens to rigs that don't have equalization? Some do, older rigs. Well, Julius Jones, he has a really nice EQ, and you can plug your microphone into that, and then that into your mic input. Elecraft, Kenwood, all the others, and they also look like this. You look at the Kenwood, they have equalizers that look like this. The same deal. We rolled off that low end under 200. We keep it up a little notch or nothing boosted, of course, at 8 or so. But then we start feathering it up, and we get up to 2400 on this one, and away you go. That's how you do it. Microphone-wise, we have several dynamic microphones that are really super for Kenwood, Yaesu, and all of those, and that's the PR781. It also is the podcaster's dream microphone, and it's 50 hertz on the bottom end and 16K on the top. But it has a 2500 cycle rise, 2.5. That's what I'm talking in right now. It is absolutely an incredible microphone. And I'm really happy that we can bring these things to ham radio, because up until now it's been kind of crazy. But as I told you earlier, it's so important. It is so important for you to learn to listen, mentally dissect what you hear. There's so much there, and a lot of people just don't care or spend time. What if you have vintage gear? What do you do? Whether it's AM gear or whether it's older single sideband like 520s or something like that, you have to remember one thing: the bandwidth is narrower, but equalization helps those. And again, Julius Jones makes a really nice one. UR6QW, Sergi's got a new one, and it really works good. So you can do all that. But pay attention to the bandwidth of your transmitter. Most of them today are flat out to 2.9, so no problem. But once in a while, some of these are only 2.4 wide. Here's what happens. You'll buy a really decent microphone with a nice response, and then you call me up and say, well, stupid microphone. No, here's what happens. The transmitter itself.
This is K9EID, and we're transmitting at 2.9K with.
This is 2.4K, and as you note, it's nice and it's articulate, but the whole bottom end drops out because of the filter network. We'll go back to 2.9.
Now this is the 2.9, and it's much smoother, has much more fidelity.
We have to pay attention to this, because you can't get much low-end response or any full-range response out of 2.4K. And it's not the fault of the audio going in, it's the filters. But those are things that you want to look at. The other thing, everybody should have an oscilloscope. You can buy them today at Hamfest. Gosh, I was at a Hamfest recently here locally in St. Louis. I must have seen 20 of these things for $30, $40, $50. And these are Tektronix. This thing could probably cost $2,000 decades ago, but it works great for what we're doing. We don't need a 100 meg scope. Don't even really need 10 meg, but you can buy these for $30. And what do you do with it, Heil? That's the big deal. Nope, that's simple. What you do is you go to Antique Electric Supply. You mark that down. Go there anyway. Boy, is that a fabulous place. They got all kinds of parts. They got old parts. You can buy a little box, some coax connectors, and you run a piece of wire. I use a inside of a RG58 straight across. Bingo. And then on the input, you do a voltage divider of 51K or 47K and then 680 to ground. And in the center of that voltage divider, a 0.04, that goes to the scope. That goes out to that RCA jack. Bingo. And you can see what you're doing. One of the other things is, how do you use a microphone? What are you talking about, Heil? I've been talking into a microphone for a long time. Yeah, but is it right? Because I hear guys, they get a microphone out and they sound terrible. And it's not their radio. It's the fact that they're sitting back in their easy chair and way back here. Remember that audio encyclopedia? That's where I learned this one. Every time you double the distance of the source, your mouth, you lose 6 decibel. Now think about this. If you double your power from 500 to a kilowatt, you only get 3 dB. You got to think about that a little bit. But now you're going to throw 6 dB away. Whoa. The transient response is gone. The dynamic range is gone. And it just sounds really flat. Well, just turn up the gain. I don't know. Then I sound like I'm in a roller rink. So that is why when I got into this ham radio business years back, I brought booms. And you really need a boom. I brought it for me because I'm always doing something. I showed you, boy, look at that. I'm working on this transmitter. And if I don't have a boom to hold my microphone, I can't operate because I'm always doing stuff when I'm on the air. So you must stay no more than 2 inches. Now think about it. No more than 2 inches from your microphone. So if you have a desk stand, you're going to have to get up on it. Be sure you learn that. It's so important. And the website, as I told you, has all of the important things you need. And just visit it. This is a very interesting thing here. A lot of people don't talk about this, but it's really important, and that's your receiver RF gain. Most all of us just crank it open and never touch it. Well, that's not the way to do it. You never want to run your RF gain wide open. Never, ever. You want to reduce it a little, sometimes a lot. You're not going to lose the signal. A lot of people say, well, when we hear the weak ones. Oh, yes, you will. But listen to this signal when you adjust the AGC, the automatic gain control, on the slow speed, not the fast speed, and rotate that RF gain down. It sounds like it's on FM. Pay attention. This is pretty cool.
About new right now.
There it is, wide open.
Technology that just kind of got forgotten, and somebody like Bob or
the fast
else
AGC.
Say, I wonder about this old stuff that we used to do.
We didn't lose anything when we turned the RF gain. Now it sounds like he's on FM.
Application, and it works great, so that's very good.
Now we're going to bring it back up.
The technical.
Now I'm up to fast.
That come along with this hobby.
And it's really sad because we have the greatest tools in our radios today, and they're not taught. That really bugs me, and it bugs me a lot. But we've got, there's so much that we can go through here, talk about, but I want to get into just a little bit on phasing. Think about this a minute. Do you really understand what happens with phasing? It's the most important thing in amateur radio. And what I mean is, let's pay attention to what happened when Art Collins came around and some of the things they did. But then it was Wes Shum that brought single sideband to ham radio. Wow, it wasn't Art. He was 6 years late to the party. How did he get the carrier out of that AM transmitter? How did he reduce and get rid of the other sideband for single sideband? So many things. Some idiot piles up on your frequency and could care less about you or anybody else. And bingo, you hit your notch filter, he's gone. How does that happen? It's all about phasing. Your receiver takes him out of phase and he is gone. Well, what about your antennas? This is the good one. I love antennas. How did Dr. Yagi, when he was building his first Yagi, how did he figure it out? He had a boom, and he put a driven element on there. It was resonant. Everything has to be resonant. We don't need tuners. We need resonance. So he had a resonant dipole, and he had a field strength meter out in front. And as he started transmitting a signal with different sizes of aluminum and different placements, quarter wave, half wave, so on, he could get gain in the right place. He also could go behind the driven so long and in the right place, it was out of phase and it could reduce your signal. Wow. That's amazing. Let me unplug this microphone. I have two microphones here. I built a Y cord, and no games played here, just so I can use two microphones. These are two of our PR22s. Paul Rogers from Bad Company wanted me to build this year's back. It's very, very articulate. You can hear the 2.5 in it, and I'm not equalizing anything here. Well, we talked about doubling our power, 500 to a kilowatt. Well, here's 500 watts. If I double my power, double my input, should get a lot louder, shouldn't it? Well, watch and listen. Remember listening. Remember. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Wait a minute. Let's do this really right. Close your eyes. See if you can hear. Listen hard when I take away half of the power. 1, 2, 3. No, because the human ear cannot detect 3 dB. Think about that. So if you're running 500 watts, you don't have the right microphone. You don't have it set up with equalization. You don't believe in any of that. And you go out and buy a kilowatt. Well, I'm going to run a kilowatt. I'll be really loud. Well, no, you wasted your money. You could have been $2,000. Let me tell you what to do with this. Take that $2,000, give it to your wife so she can go buy some shoes and purses. That'll be better than anything you could possibly do. Now, let's get serious. I have this little plug. This little plug is backwards. Pin 2, coughing, who's coughing? Pin 2 is hooked to 3, and 3 is hooked to 2. It's out of phase. Well, now wait a minute. It sounds the same. That's true. This one's out of phase, and when I speak in it, the diaphragm comes up. When I speak into this one, man, somebody got a cough. When I speak into this one in phase, it goes down. What happens when I take two signals that are out of phase? Watch the screen and listen. Nothing. Nothing. It cancels. Oh, they still work, but not together. They cancel because this one's coming up, that one's going down. So now, boy, think of all the things we can talk about. Oh, but this is one of my favorites. Phased arrays. I've always heard about phased arrays. All the big time antenna guys and go, wow. But beyond my comprehension. No, it's not. I built this one. I went to the exchange, electric exchange, and they gave me these telephone poles. They got them laying around because they got rotted off or so on. So we have two telephone poles 64 foot apart. Pay attention. This is very important.
Installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antenna's directive from east to west, we use a delay line of 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do, mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after you done mow it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will of course make the meter read higher, but in many cases the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Hey, Sue. Yeah, well, I see they introduced big display on it, and I don't know if that is their form of portable, or what that is. Your wire, and that hooked up to your computer, and then did you use your handheld to go through it?
Well, it proves how wonderful things are with phased arrays, and they're pretty simple. You can do a number of things. You can do a pair of verticals, and again, it's the same deal with the phasing line. That phasing line is real important when you put this all together. The two down leads are exactly the same length. They're 126 foot on 75, and that delay line's 43 foot. And these are all figured quarter wave, half waves, so on. And when you switch with the remote box, it's out with the antennas. When you switch to the left, that's your driven because the transmitter's going straight into it. You switch it the other way, and that now is delayed, and so that is out of phase. It just works so well. And there's a number of ways to do it. You can do it by running the leads inside your shack and doing it with a switch like that. Here's a wonderful array for 40 meters that really works. A friend of mine, K8MN, he works a lot of DX with this. He didn't have room for a regular 40 meter phased array, so he did it this way. Up on top of the tower, he had a 2x4, varnished it well, and then the two elements. It was really great. But here's something I told you earlier. You want to take 2.5 with you. Well, if you don't take any more away than that, this is it. Let's talk about the antenna height. Higher is not always better. Some years back, I read a thing that Art Collins wrote, and he states that most transmitting antennas of resonant dimensions elevated at a quarter wave above the ground are as close to 100% efficiency as possible. Think about that. I wanted to prove it. So some years back, we had a group of guys on 7240 every night, and there were usually about 6 or 8 guys around the country, Florida, California. One was at the Collins station in Cedar Rapids. And I had a reference antenna at 20 foot, and I'd start off the night with that antenna so we could see what the atmosphere is doing. Then every night I would come on with a different antenna at different heights. Well, first of all, we all discovered after many, many antennas, that's the key. Art Collins even told you that. Nothing like a resonant dipole. I only like to put a balun, not a balum. It just reeks when I hear people do that. It's a balun, a balanced to unbalanced. Coming up from the transmitter is an unbalanced signal, but the antenna is balanced. And so that allows you to keep the RF off of that shield as it goes back into the station. But what we did, I came up the first night, I was at 20 feet. Then the next night, I came up to 30 feet. I was a little better. Then I went to 40 foot, and it wasn't all that great. I went back to 33 foot, and amazing. It was very strong, stronger than anything. Then we went up another night later, we went up to 50 feet, and it really wasn't much to talk about over the 33 foot. But then when I went to 66 foot the next night, oh baby, why? Well, it's just what the science dictates. Your antenna has 2 waves. It has the direct wave and the reflected ray. And if you can get that reflected wave ray to coincide with the directed, oh yeah. And you do that by keeping those elements together and making sure that they're quarter wave, half waves. It's all about experimenting. But if you can get the right height, it's not always higher, you can really make things sing. It's really fun. And I do all kinds of things. I have a whole hour we talk about antennas, but just little things. I hate pulleys. We should never, ever, ever use pulleys because I don't care what they are. I started using the really expensive marine pulley. No, they catch. Nah. Use carabiners. A locking 6-inch stainless steel carabiner. There's nothing like it. You will never have a problem with that. And you can do a lot of fan dipoles. I love the coaxial dipole of MIT. No, not the double bazooka, whatever that is. You go back to the 1938 MIT coaxial dipole. That's the baby. and that really plays. That's what I made the phased array out of, and that it's amazing. It's very broad, and it it's a wonderful thing. Check into it. But another thing, guys like to use twin lead and line leads. No, you have a lot of problem when you're using those type of spacers and stuff because snow and rain and anything affects them. Here's the way to do that. You take 2 pieces of coax, don't care what they are, just so they're the same. You solder the shields together, not anything to do with the driven as it comes out of the centers. And then down in the shack, you do it again. You solder the two together and then put it in a ballon. This is an amazing antenna feed, and you can take any length out there, and with a good tuner, you can tune all kinds of frequencies. But that ladder line stuff it's a joke. Why do we not know about this? I don't get it. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, most of the guys, hey, the Army has a book and tells the guys that if you get out in the field and you don't have a place to hang an antenna, use a tree. Guess what? It works. When we were doing that experiment years back, it works. No, it's not real loud, but I could get a signal out of an oak tree. And we didn't experiment with different kinds of trees, but hey, what the heck. Okay, so you want an attic antenna. Here's the baby. Pay attention. Jim, AC0KN. He had this great idea for an attic fan antenna. He wanted it to be 80 to 2 meters, and he did it. This is how he did it. They are resonant. 75, 40, all of the different frequencies, each one are resonant. And that's how he built it. The back side behind all those thumb screws that the wire's attached to, they're all coupled together. And here's what it looks like built. This is really amazing. He worked over 100 countries with this thing when he first put it up. And here it is in the attic. There's another view of it. But for all the doom and gloomers, check this out. I only did 40 meters to show you, but believe me, all of them are really flat in their respective bandwidth. 6 meters was the baddie, but he didn't care. He just wanted it at 51.7 where a repeater was, and he cut it to length until he got it right. So we can do some fabulous things if we just think. And then you get into the guys with the SWR. Oh my God, they waste so much time on that one. If you're so worried about your SWR, put your dummy load on your tower. It'll be perfect. When I got into this hobby for the first 20 years, we didn't even know what an SWR meter was. And I never pay much attention to it because I cut all of my antennas to the frequency. They're resonant. Oh, I check them. I usually check them with one of the MFJ antenna analyzers, but it doesn't bother me if it's 1.9 to anything under 2.5, you're okay. But I hear these guys all the time. Now I got a goodie for you. When I first got in this hobby, my mentor was K0DGE. I met up with him on 6 meter sideband about 2 weeks into my license. And that's where I first learned about sideband. He was one of the first people on single sideband on 6 meters. I didn't know this. Think about it, 1956. And he's the guy that taught me how to build my single sideband transmitter. And I still have, by the way, there it is, that 20A you see right over there. Still have it. Only now it's on 75 and 20 and all the other things. But He taught me how to put coax together. And, you know, I was doing it the way the AWR handbook, it is the little holes in it. You cannot guarantee that all those wires are soldered in that shield. You can't do that because they aren't. Why not do it right? And he taught me how to do it right. Like this. You tin that 259, put it in a vise and tin it really good because it's going to be smoking hot. Let it cool down for 20, 30 minutes. Then solder the center in. That's easy. But then you take the shield around it, cut it off, and solder it because it'll solder real nice that you have that bead of solder on it. Well, I never talked about it much because everybody makes fun of me. Oh, Heil, what's wrong with that? Why can't you put one on there, right? Well, that's the way to do it. So I just quit talking until about, it was 4 or 5 years ago. I visited K3LR. Tim Duffy, one of the guys at DX Engineering. And if you don't know who Tim is, he is the contest mogul. It's a couple of $1 million station, and K3LR is always the top of the list. A wonderful guy, great mentor and teacher. I walked into his station. We're in $1 million station here. I look over in the corner. What do I see? A bundle of coaxes. I don't know how many towers he has. I should count it sometime. But what did I see at the end of those coaxes? I saw this. I ran over and gave him a big hug. He said, what's wrong with this guy? I said, you have just solidified my connectors. He said, what are you talking about? And I told him. He said, oh, no. There's only one way to do coax connectors, and it's this way. And so, since he got with DX Engineering, they have a tool. You can now buy this from DX Engineering. You take a piece of RG8, you stick it in there, and it cuts it off so that it kind of looks like this. And all you got to do is put it together. Put the other end into here, cut it off, and it cuts off the shield really neat, cuts off the center, does all the right dimensions, and plug it in there, solder the shield. That's the way you do it. Then I always wrap tape around it for 2 reasons. I want to keep water out of it, but I don't want anybody to see it so they don't make any fun. They don't make fun of me. But anymore, I don't care. You want to talk about it? You talk to Tim Duffy that's got a $2 million contest station, he'll tell you. What do you do to get coax into your house? This is how I do it. Before, when we had the plywood down before the tile, we put a toilet flange, like we're going to set a toilet there. And then we put the tile on. Bingo, it really, really works nice. And a very simple way to bring coax into this station. So there are just so many things. We could just be here all night covering a lot of things. I was on Ham Nation for 10 years, and I always want people to build. I'm a builder. And I thought, along about 2018, let's start something. So every Ham Nation Wednesday night, we would have a little session for about 20 minutes about the pine board project. What are you talking about? Well, when I first got into the hobby and earlier in that, people built things on pine board. And that's what we did. Every night we'd come on with a different part of it, so on. That's a power supply on the left top. We built a mic preamp with equalization and the final 6AG7 and a 6V6 Heising modulator. That was a 2-band, 80 and 40. You notice there's a little clip lead up on that one. If you want to go to 40 meters, you take that clip and you short out part of the coil. That was the band switch in those days. And you know what? It's exactly what the band switch is today. It's when you go to different bands, it's just shorting out different coils. But this was wonderful. We had over 1,000 people that have built this so far. How I know that, you can go to Antique Electric Supply and they have all the kits. But one of the things that really drove it was Gene, W4IQN. He came up out of the audience. He said, "Hey, I think I can help you with our drawings because my original drawings were bad." He was a graphic artist at General Motors. Look at those. They're better than Heathkit. You don't even need to read schematics. You just get a piece of pine board and make it happen. It went so well that the league brought in January 2019, and it became the cover award and the lead article. And it's all told there. But you go to my website, heilsound.com, and in the ham radio page, in the search box, put Pine Board Project. And I think there's about 80 pages, all the little videos of each night, so on. It's really wonderful. But the really cool part is that people did all kinds of things. A guy built one in a cigar box. One guy built in one of his kids' lunch boxes. And we had so much fun. Guy, a very experienced builder, did it this way. There's a guy that took an old chassis from a guitar amp, and just on and on. But we always had to warn everybody, be careful, you're dealing with 400 or 500 volts here. And it's AM, so you want to respect the AM window. This was dedicated back in the late 50s, right after I got my license. It was a big deal because AM was king. And when sidebands started coming in the mid-50s, there were wars. I'm talking about wars. One instance I know of is a guy from Paducah, Kentucky. He was having a lot of problems with the sidebanders down across the valley. So he picked up his shotgun and he knocked on the guy's front door and he said, "I'm here to talk to you about getting off of my frequency." Nobody got hurt, but they sat down as gentlemen. There were about 20 of them, and they figured it out. Here's what we're going to do. AM operators are usually crystal controlled. Now, the ones today aren't, but 3870 to 3890, you keep your sideband elsewhere because you got a lot more space. 7290 to 7295, 14286, and so on. And it's a gentleman's agreement, but it's been lost over the past few years because the new guys, it's 20 years and newer, they never heard about it. And the league doesn't really say much about it, although they do adhere to it, but they don't talk about it much. And I talk about it a lot because we really want to be gentlemen about all this stuff. So that's really important. The last thing I want to talk to you about is what I do to receivers. I work for these companies. I'm inside their plants, I've always tell them, do something to your receiver. Well, our receiver's fine. And they're talking about sensitivity, selectivity. I'm talking about audio. Even the $15,000 ones, they have 10% distortion at about 2 watts. Give me a break. That's why you have never seen a spec sheet on audio out, because I think they're embarrassed. And so I did something about it. First of all, I see all these speakers, these matching speakers or these powered speakers. They're all garbage. Especially the matching ones, all that does is it's just taking the little 1 or 2 watts at 10%. Yes, your transceiver has 10% of distortion, and it drives me crazy. Remember that listening. So I did something about it. First of all, went back to my archives of what Art Collins taught. Paul Clips taught me. Look how big that magnet is. After finding the right speaker, we take it out into free air, find out what the cone resonance of that is. Then you treat the cabinet to that frequency so there's no phase distortion. And the amplifier on the back panel isn't 1 or 2 watts, it's 25. Why do you have so much? You're only going to use 1 or 2 watts, but you have what we call headroom. Now, you also want to note that has balanced line input. So we use balanced line audio. You got 25 watts and a tuned cavity. This thing is magnificent. And I knew it was going to help a lot of people, but I didn't know it was going to help in the manner that it did. We're getting so many people that are calling me, and they're buying this not only for just ham radio, but for television and all kinds of other things. Well, let's go take a listen and see what's happening here. I did some recordings off air, and we're going to go pay attention to this little baby. Here's the deal. We have the input. Then we have the high filter at 6K plus or minus. We have the parametric mids. So you can go from 400 to 4,000. This is the gain. We'll set that gain and leave it of that filter. And this is the low filter at 160 hertz, and I usually roll it off a little bit. But over here, this is an output. It's a line out. It's not some Y chord. It's a separate audio line out that you can plug into your computer and really make some nice recordings. You don't need any Y chords. And then the almighty ham. Oh, so many hams are getting into this one. This is your headphone amplifier section, and there's two of them. One for the logger, one for the operator. But you can also put your left speaker in here and your right speaker in there. So if you have a hearing imbalance, this is your ticket. And that's where so much of this is coming up today. And I'm really,
just by adding some 2.5.
really thrilled about what we have done to help many people.
It's not the same as a
Let's,
rig built,
go
you know,
listen
just
a little
for 2 meter sideband. You know, the receivers will
There's the
never
way you hear
compare.
him.
So it's kind of nice that, again, ICOM technology. They were nice enough in my county.
That's the way
which
you
was
hear
the
him.
worst, by the way, paid in the area. They
But
gave
it's
me 5
mushy.
years seniority. But I was basically starting at the bottom.
Has
So
some sparkle
many
to it.
times people who spend 20 years in the Navy or
almighty
whatever the military
2.5K.
is and retire, people say, well, you got it made. No, you
The
don't.
next one is a D104. It's all bass. And
I thought, well, I wonder if I can
you want to
copy
put
that
some low end in it.
at about 30 words a minute.
We
So
can do that. You
I
ready?
speeded up the tape,
Okay,
and
here we go.
sure enough, I can copy it. I had a lot of fun the other night. I thought, well, I wonder if I can copy that
Here it is flat.
at about 30
The
words
way
a
you
minute.
hear
So
him.
I speeded up the tape, and sure enough, I can copy it.
So you can do all kinds of things. But here's the biggie. There's the way you hear that DX station. You ready?
Echo India 8 Bravo Lima Bravo EI8LB calling in.
It is flat the way you hear it.
For Sierra Germany. Hope I have it right. Very good day to you from
It is flat.
Name is Lima India Alpha Mike, over. Hello, CQ20 meters. Echo India 8 Bravo Lima Bravo EI8LB calling in by.
There is no argument. This thing is a miracle. And so many times, almost daily, I'm getting a lot of emails and phone calls, guys just thanking me because I give them the radio back. And that's what it's all about, is that you don't have anything like that. And so I'm really happy and very proud of this product. And it's helping a lot of us. I'm using one on my television. Televisions are terrible. Their audio systems are just awful. But there's all kinds of other things, and I have a handbook. If you don't have this, I advise you to take a look at it. I didn't write it I just compiled a lot of the notes from many of my mentors throughout the years. 65 of them, as a matter of fact. I've been a licensed ham. You go to our website to the pro side and put this into the search. It all starts with the microphone. You can download that, and it really gives you a lot of stuff too, a lot of good information. But all the dealers have it. Or if you want to call our plant, you can order this online and I'll autograph it for you, if that means anything. I guess it does to some, and I'm very proud of that. A few years back, I was really, really taken aback. Heil Sound is the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That mixer you see, we built that for Pete Townsend and the Who to do Quadrophenia. It's the first and only quadraphonic mixer. IES, our sister company in England, and Heil Sound put all that together. The back side of that, you see on the lower side, that's a mixer we built for ZZ Top and the first talk boxes there. And then a couple years ago, I was honored with an honorary PhD in music and technology from Missouri University. Think about it. This is a kid that barely made it through high school, but I learned it from ham radio, and that's the most important thing. You got to have some questions. Let's bring them up and see what we got.
Anybody got any questions?
Anybody?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi there. This is Ed, WAEO. Nice to see you on the tube tonight. I compared DMR and System Fusion audio, and without any additions to it, I noticed there's a tremendous difference between the audio on Yaesu and the audio on DMR. And is that built into the receive part of the application, or how does that work?
I don't really know because I don't play with it much. The only thing I know is I get a lot of people complaining about it. It's all digital stuff, and you're not going to, they're all ones and zeros, and you're not going to change that much. And so I don't know what we can do with it, to be honest with you. It's what it is what it is. And it's kind of
Okay.
sad, I guess, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, the DMR has a lot more highs to it, along the range of what you're talking about. And the Yaesu just sounds very muffled at my location. It may be different than other places. I don't know if it's something I'm doing or, the basic nature of the product, but that's my experience.
Well, you heard what we can do with the parametric EQ system in the receiver. We can help a lot of things.
Good to know.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any others?
Hey, Bob, this is Dana, KC0MYP.
Huh?
Hi. We saw that you just sold your company. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, you got to read that properly. Some of the people called me, said I thought I was dead. Then we got a lot of people said I was retired. None of that's true. Certainly not retired. And of course, as you can see, I'm not dead. But no, this has been in the works for a long time. My stepson he's really been around, golly, for 25 years with me as he went through his schooling. He's a certified PhD professor of psychology, and he taught for a few years, but up in New York, but he didn't like it. But he also is a classically trained musician, and he also plays a lot of guitar, and he knows a lot of the new groups. So he's been working with me for a long, long time. And it's the obvious thing to do is to bring he and Stephen, who's my director of operations, into this company, because I don't want it going away. I don't want some conglomerate coming in when someday I won't be here. I'm 82 years old. So you kind of got to look. I mean, no, I'm not dying. Don't start that rumor. But in business, you have to look. I've seen so many companies that when that happens, it hasn't been thought over, and some truck tire company buys it, and it's like, what? And so we're going to make sure that's not going to happen, and guaranteed that's not going to happen, because Stephen and Ash really have it going. Sarah, my wife's been the president for, oh golly, 20 years, but she retired last summer actually, and Stephen and Ash had been running the ship very well, I might add. We're double the last 2 years of all of our other 55 years. So we're very blessed because things are going well, and it'll keep it going well for the ham radio industry. But I'm still designing. I'm still screwing around with a soldering iron. I had somebody last night with one of them said, well, we heard that you're always close to a soldering iron. Yeah, I am. Where to go down here? I have my soldering iron right here, just to prove to you. I always have it. It's not hot right now, but I'm never more than about 3 feet from a soldering iron because I'm always doing things, you hear? And it's just so much fun because I love building and I love sharing this hobby with all of you. So that's the true story of that press release. So I hope that you got it all right, Dan. Thanks for asking. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And also, I heard you 9 months ago speak to the California PAPA system. God, you were amazing. Speaking 2 hours straight.
Thank you. Yeah, that's easy to do. There's so much to talk about, as you see here tonight. I can do a whole hour on what it's like to be on the road with Keith Moon.
Can you tell us any stories of when you helped out some rock and roll artists?
Well, one thing about it, I'm going to preface this by telling everybody, I have never tasted beer in my 82 years. I've never smoked anything. For gosh sakes, never did any drugs. And these guys, if I couldn't be friends to them and I didn't want to work with them, and one of my great friends was Pete Townsend, and Pete always put it really neat. After a show, we'd all be backstage putting things together, and they'd all be passing their little things around. Hey, leave him alone, man. The guy's got a soldering iron. He makes it sound good, and he can drive the truck. And I did. So, but there's just so much to all of this. I'm so blessed, and we've gone a long way, and we're in the pro industry. Especially, so many of the groups today that are using Heil microphones because all the big microphone companies are now built in China. And yeah, I have a few parts there, but I design those parts. Those parts are made for me. And that's very important that I can design things and have them built, but I don't have all of them built in China for darn sure. Very few, but again, I'm the guy that designed the parts. They did build it. A lot of the parts are coming from Malaysia, some really beautiful stuff out of there, from the UK, and we're getting some things from South America. Taiwan is doing some nice things. So there's a lot of other companies out there that are doing beautiful things, and most of the companies they just go away. They go to China, they build it all, and that's good for them. Well, it definitely is not good for me. I don't like that at all, and we'll continue on that way. That's for sure. But yeah, thanks for asking.
Bob?
Yes.
Have you ever worked with a friend of mine, Joe Bonamassa?
No,
Rochester.
Joe was one of the guys I never got to be with. He's a great artist, as you know, but I never was able to work with Joe, and he's a fantastic musician. He can really rip the he ripped the neck off of that guitar. That's for sure.
Yeah, since he was 13.
Yeah.
No, he's the geek of his field, like you're the geek of your field. Thank
you. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's so much of the artists that behind the scenes you don't realize how great some of them are. And the country artists, there's some really heavyweight guitar players, and they do some great things, but they're not noted for that. That's what always bugged me. But boy, you get into some of these country artists. Keith Urban, as a matter of fact, Keith is just amazing, and so many of these guys. Well, you ask about, I'll give you a story about the Who. I was with them for almost 6 years, and it started in 1972 with Who's Next. And let me get this all set up for you. We were summoned to go on the road with them because they were failing. They came to America, and things are really crazy. We were the only company that really did tours in this all happened in 1970. I leased a 40-foot semi, and I bought an old Greyhound bus, and we slept 11 guys in there, so that saved a lot of money, but we all got there at the same time. And there's a group. I did their very first tour. We're still working with them. Does anybody know who that is? Nobody ever guesses.
ZZ Top.
That's ZZ Top, and there they are with beards. We're still with them.
Wow.
I love that. But I got a call from the Who one day and said, "We need you in Boston tomorrow." I said, "I can't be there." "Well, why not?" I said, "Because we're out with Chaka Khan. She uses one of my talk boxes, and we do all of her PA work." And so, "We don't care. We have to have you here." And they just kept putting, "Well, wait a minute. Who are you?" He said, "Well, we're the Who." Oh, boy. I said, "Well, we can't get there. We have semi-trucks and buses." "No problem. You go out to the airport and you rent a Flying Tigers airplane." I said, "You're paying for all this, right?" "Yeah." So we did, and we saved them. We really did save them. They were having a huge problem because they came over here with new music and a PA that was only 4 little bitty columns with 8-inch speakers in them. And so they had heard about this massive kilowatt stuff we had, and we became really good friends. This is a picture of Townsend's studio, which is above his home in the Thames. After we did 2 years with him, he said, "Hey, come over here, Heil. I want to talk to you about something. I got an idea." And you can see some incredible things going on there in 1972, 73. He was a master at computers, at keyboards, and of course synthesizers were new. And he was marrying them together. You see him with that red chair. He that's a little Lowry $900 home organ. And he took that in that other picture up there and coupled it to his synthesizer, and that's what he did Baba O'Reilly with. You know it, you've heard it, you recognize it. That was done on this picture top right. He got the tones out of the Lowry, and he was letting the synthesizer do all of the rest. He had a Bosendorfer 9-foot grand in that studio, and then of course he played that part, and it just went on and on and on. And so he said, "Listen, quad sound is big right now. Do you think you could build a PA that we could move Roger's voice around the hall. And I said, well, yeah, we can do that. And it just so happened, so many things in my life, timing is so important, and it just happened. We were working with our sister company, International Entertainment System in London, at the time to build a console. One hadn't been built for rock and roll. They were all mixers for broadcast and so on. And so we had this just about done, but we had a couple of months that we added that center section that we could switch around and have quad channels out of it. So, okay. Quadrophenia. It was a great thing to me. People will ask me, what's your favorite? My favorite song is Rain Over Me out of Quadrophenia. If you never heard it, go listen to it. Put the headphones on, turn your telephone off, put your iPhone in your pocket and whatever. Listen to that thing. It's incredible. And Pete just did a fantastic job with that whole album, but I really loved, and that's him playing the piano on all those parts. Well, we're doing the first night of Quadrophenia. We'd been working on this for 2 years. The equipment, the music, all that. So we opened at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. First night. About halfway through that concert, I always stood behind Pete's amplifiers, and anybody, whoever it was, I stood behind their amplifiers because if anything happened on stage, I wanted to be there. We had people out front of the house mixing. I wanted to be there in case any problems. And I'm looking over at crazy little Keith Moon. I'm going, what is going on here? He was collapsed over his drums, but he'd do that every once in a while. Pete kept playing, the band kept playing. He said, what's wrong with him? Is he spoofing? No, he was passed out. And so this is a great story of the opening night of Quadrophenia, and you'll see the back of my head and my long hair. Hey, I didn't have to do all their stuff, but I had to kind of look like them. So here we go. Check this out. This is pretty interesting. We have okay, here we go. We had to carry him out underneath the curtain. Yes. And so we always had a doctor with us because I never knew what these guys are going to do. Found out that Keith Moon had taken a tranquilizer for a 2,000-pound horse. No wonder. You can't make this stuff up. One of our big things to the rock and roll industry is because of my knowledge of phasing that came from antennas and that I do in microphones. I was the first guy to do monitors. You see, those little slant monitors you see on the right, that's how it all started out. Well, you can't take those and put them underneath, right underneath you because they're going to feed back in the microphone, right? Well, if you saw early pictures of the Grateful Dead, I used 2 microphones taped taped together. One of them was out of phase and one was in. You saw a while ago what happens. That one that was out of phase didn't hear anything. And so, Heil Sound was the first company to come up with monitors. And then we come up with big monitors. You're looking at about 800 watts of monitors besides John Entwistle, and he's not 5 foot from it. And Pete, you notice Pete's monitors, you can just see the Heil logo on the harness right at his ear. That's about right at 1,000 or 100 watts in that driver right into his ear. And Keith, he really loved this because he was starting to get some hearing loss then, and we really helped him. But we built all kinds of things. We built modular amplifiers, so if it broke down, you open up the spare kit you got with it, and 2 minutes later you had your amp back up and running. We also did a lot of things. We had 35 people working in this plant, 7,000 square foot in Marissa. And it was just a marvelous time during those days. I have to tell you, we were moving and grooving. Did a lot of festivals. I didn't like them, but I did them because, like this one, they said, "Oh, there's going to be 10,000 people." No, there wasn't. There was 100,000 people there, and I saw way too much of this, so I said, "Okay." But that's just a small list of what we had done. So that's just a little synopsis of what Heil Sound was doing in those days, and we still do it today. Only today we're just doing microphones, very special microphones. So we're very happy and blessed. So that give you a little treat. Anybody have anything else before we head out?
You talked about Pete Townsend and a synthesizer. Did you ever work with Walter / Wendy Carlos?
No, I never did. No, but he, she, whatever, was really, really super. They had great things going on. Yeah.
Wow.
Emerson, Lake, and Palmer also worked with them a little bit. Great people. See, my whole thing was, I was a Hammond organist, and I had a lot of things going on before I ever became a ham, actually, in the organ world. And I mean, I was playing the organ professionally when I was 14 years old, and I was able to tear things apart, Hammond organ wise, and build all kinds of different organs and stuff. And so many of the rock artists would come to me because I knew how to wire them real special and get more power out of their Leslie speakers and so on. So every once in a while I still get called on to do some of that. But today, it's all about that. That is it for me. That's about 10 feet in front of me. This is a theater organ, 3 manuals, and it's a digital sampling of over 3,000 pipes. And it's all done through speakers and magic things today. And I play every day. And you will have 2 ways to end this program. You can go up to the Zoom thing and say goodbye, or I'll go over here and play a little couple of minute ditty on
Go
you.
over and play.
Okay, you ready?
Play.
Okay, I gotta adjust a couple of knobs here, and away we go. Thanks for having me, everybody. Let's go back.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
You still rock.
Check something here.
Yeah.
Sure that's good. Okay.
What?
Okay.
outstanding.
Excellent.
Encore, encore.
Big thanks to Mike Wetzel for getting Bob to join us tonight.